Through this theory, we can redefine the concept of anticipation. To do so, we must talk about anticipation as a case of deliberate enrichment. This might not be clear at first, allow me to explain it. What does deliberate enrichment case mean? The interpreter deliberately tries to complete the message of the speaker instead of waiting for the speaker to finish it. How this can happen? For instance, when the interpreter is listening to the speaker, he formulates certain hypotheses and he picks the first hypothesis that is more aligned with the context without using much effort. In other words, anticipation is this constant looking for relevance. That's why we call it relevance theory. If the interpreter is unable to make this process, it might be because he doesn't have enough stimulus to produce the message. Or maybe he doesn't have enough information to complete the process of anticipation. Therefore, there's this definition that you can see on the screen, because anticipation is this mental production of assumptions related to elements that have not been expressed by the speaker yet. In other words, the interpreter produces hypotheses of content before the speaker finishes his message. To continue with the topic, I want to say that anticipation is not only guessing words, but a complex cognitive process that allows us to keep up with the rhythm of the speaker and also to guarantee the coherence of the message. Anticipation is a tool of the interpreter to be a step forward and keep up with the fluency of the message. It can be divided into linguistic anticipation and extra-linguistic anticipation. Linguistic is related to the structure of the language. For example, if we hear the word rights, we can anticipate human rights or labor rights. However, for the extra-linguistic anticipation, this is when we use our previous knowledge. For instance, in a speech about a very specific topic like European politics, we might hear words like parliament, commission. Anticipate not only depends of the language, but depends on different modules of information that the interpreter activates in his mind when interpreting. There's a difference between anticipation and freewheeling. This doesn't happen in the brain, but in the production process, and is related to the reaction times. Sometimes we might be able to anticipate information faster, but other times this is going to take a while. This could be related to the abilities of the interpreter or the specific circumstances of the speech. However, On the other side, anticipation can have different objectives. For instance, one objective could be avoid complex structures, or maybe achieve the same fluency of the speaker. Additionally, another objective could be to improve the quality of the rendition. However, in all those cases, interpreter acts as if there's a void in this speech, and it is his responsibility to fill this void with the most relevant information. Authors such as Kalina and Van Bessian talk about a double strategy. This strategy is divided in two phases: the top-down phase and the bottom-up phase. The first one is related to the previous knowledge of the interpreter. He uses this previous knowledge to anticipate information in the speech. However, for the second phase, called bottom-up, this is about verifying the information with verifying the anticipation with information that the interpreter receives after. According to the relevance theory, anticipation is monostrategic. In other words, anticipation only happens in the process of formulating the hypothesis. Nevertheless, verifying is a phase that happens at the end. This is called monitoring. This is what matters. Interpreting is never going to be the same as listening in our everyday life, because the interpreter needs to build a cognitive context very similar to the speakers. Also, the interpreter must consider the assumptions of the speaker as more valid than the ones of his own. In some cases, even he has to suppress his knowledge so that the interpreter can align with the speaker. So when the interpreter confirms that what he anticipated is correct, this is no news for him, but a confirmation that helps his process. In conclusion, I want you to remember that anticipation is a complex cognitive process that can have different types, objectives according to the relevance theory, and also different phases, as we've seen before regarding double strategy. However, I believe that anticipation is one of the key factors that differentiate the professional interpreting and communication in our everyday lives. Anticipation allows the interpreter to keep the rhythm, quality, and relevance that a speech must have. This uses extra linguistic knowledge and the ability abilities of the interpreter to formulate hypotheses of meaning. All these elements make the interpreter an active participant of communication. Thank you.